MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So yeah, now it's cleanup on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be cleanup on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 175 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. And as we record this, we waited till the last possible second to be able to get the files to our producers and editors to have this be able to go out Wednesday morning. It is currently 7:20 p.m. Eastern time as we record this on Tuesday night. And the jury is supposed to, they're supposed to wrap up today in the next 40 minutes. But I don't know if they'll be done yet with the closing arguments for the DA. But we'll keep an eye on it for you. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. And like you said, we'll be covering those closing arguments. And one way or the other, whether it is tonight or tomorrow morning, the prosecution is going to finish and it'll be jury instructions and in the hands of the jury tomorrow as you're listening to this. So everybody will be waiting. And so we're going to go through what went on in those closing arguments during the criminal election interference trial, along with some of the cross-examination of Bob Costello last week and the battle over jury instructions.
Yes, we'll talk briefly about that as we cover the summations that happened today, yesterday, as you're listening to this. And in other news, we're going to discuss the arraignment of Rudy Giuliani, along with an agreement he has made to stop defaming Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. We also have updates on Pete Navarro, the E. Jean Carroll case, Jenna Ellis, Steve Bannon, Fulton County. We have all sorts of stuff to cover. But first, we have some new patrons to thank. Thank you so much for signing up. You make this show possible. Thank you for supporting independent media. From Cheese and Kraken, wonderful, Vivian, Aaron Sky McDonald, Erica Farrell, Jody, Amy Davis, and Sydney Brahmavar. Thank you. Thank you. We cannot thank you enough. And Pete and I are planning our next Q&A Zoom call with the cleanup patrons, and also deep in the works, another gala that will be strategically placed based on when I think trials may or may not be taking place. So keep your eyes peeled for that. So anyway, thank you again, patrons. You are really incredible. All right, let's talk about the closing arguments today, Tuesday, in the Trump election interference trial. Todd Blanche was up first for the defense. And of course, Trump and all the MAGA right have been complaining just today about the fact that the prosecution gets to go first, despite that being the rule since forever. Andrew Giuliani was very upset about it. He could have just asked his dad. But, top line thoughts, Pete, for me, on Blanche's closing arguments. He jumped around a lot, much like he did in the cross-examination of Michael Cohen. He never really found a groove. His argument focused on how the case hinges solely on Michael Cohen and that Michael Cohen cannot be trusted. He's a liar and he's a thief and he's a bully. Stayed completely away from the testimony of Hope Hicks and Pecker and David, like all these other people who corroborated what Michael Cohen had to say. And at one point, he accused Cohen of perjury in this case, which triggered a sustained objection. And then after he meandered for sort of like 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours, he ended by calling Cohen, he's like, "You've heard of Tom Brady being the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Well, Michael Cohen is the GLOAT, the greatest liar of all time." And then he had, like, stop trying to make gloat happen. And then he ended with the top 10 reasons that the jury should find reasonable doubt.
Don't do that.
No. And I've long said Trump and his team underestimate the intelligence of this jury, and they do it at their own peril. To assume they don't know why Weisselberg isn't there, where he is, or why he's there is a mistake. And they indulged in that mistake today when they wondered where Weisselberg was. That's a bad idea. I think the prosecution will correct them as much as they're able, and they do a bit, but they don't really need to, I think, with this jury. And the other error that Blanche indulged in during his summation is that the sex with Stormy Daniels never happened.
Come on.
It would be a more reasonable defense that the sex did happen, but Trump didn't participate in the cover-up. But Blanche said in his closing arguments, Trump denies that it happened, which is a far cry from it never happened, right? He had to say Trump denied that it happened. That tells me Trump wanted Blanche to deny it, and Trump denies it happening is the farthest Blanche was willing to go. So these gimmicks like the gloat and the top 10 listicle, I think they're cute, I think they're gimmicky, and I think they're above this jury.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, come on. The entire jury is also looking at today. They trotted out like even the forgotten daughter, Tiffany, was. You
almost forgot her name.
Yeah, I did. It was like Tambourine. No, Tiffany. It? Tiffany, but along with Eric and Don Jr. But the jury also, I am certain, noticed that Melania did not show up one day. Ivanka did not show up one day. And so when you're sitting there in the context of why they never appeared, in conjunction with these denials, jurors aren't dumb. New York jurors aren't dumb. They're going to see through it. Yeah. And look, Blanche, I've always thought like people, I never worked with Todd Blanche. I shared some cases with Emile Beauvais in SDNY with some folks in the FBI in New York, and whatever. At least I know people who worked with him on cases. I don't know Todd Blanche, but people sometimes mistake that this guy was a federal prosecutor. Doesn't mean they're going to be good in the courtroom. It's the same deal. Like the dirty secret is like you compare the amount of like actual hands-on arrest time and sort of altercations that an FBI agent gets into over the course of his career versus, say, a big city police officer, it is night and day. And so if you want somebody who has been in the courtroom all the time, federal prosecutors are very competent, they're very good, but in many cases, the amount of court experience that you get as an assistant United States attorney in a U.S. attorney's office is going to be substantially less than somebody in a district attorney's office. And I think you're seeing some of that.
And I think it's especially true if you're a prosecutor and now you're a criminal defense attorney. It's a very different animal.
Yeah. And, and Blanche made some pretty significant errors that were corrected on sidebar after his summation. First he said, well, the jury can't convict on the testimony of Michael Cohen. And that's absolutely false. The jury can convict on the testimony of Cohen. And after summation, the DA's office asked the judge to address that. In addition to that, Blanche said, quote, you can't send President Trump to prison based on the testimony of Michael Cohen. Now, that was a big mistake. And here's what was said after the jury was excused for lunch. Justice Merchan, quote, I think that comment was outrageous, Mr. Blanche. As someone who has been a prosecutor, that it's simply not allowed, period. It's hard to see how that was an accident. I'm going to give the curative instruction, unquote. So, again, keep in mind, this is like on the heels of earlier when he, again, out of earshot of the jury, told Blanche that his credibility was under some question with the court. But it's a bad news, and in fact, he did give a curative instruction to the jury saying that they did not determine the sentence, that was the judge's decision alone, and it was horrible. That was like the last word. It was much like Costello, which we'll talk about in a little bit, being the last witness. It's just a bad place if people. And they do all these studies, and I don't know where I picked this up. It was some training in the FBI that talks about and it was giving presentations, and some business school had done a study where they have a PowerPoint presentation, and they measured people's attention, and they, I assume, have a little knob of how attentive are you, how not attentive are you. People's attention is super heightened at the very beginning when you start. That is the highest level at any point somebody's talking, and hence only one chance to make a first impression. That is because studies have shown that is when people are most attentive. And then it drops off and it goes down. And then when you start wrapping up, and if you're signaling saying, now in conclusion, people's attention comes back up. Not quite as high as the beginning, but there's the beginning and the end, or when they're paying attention. And for Blanche to screw up twice, in my opinion, both with Costello and then by getting a curative instruction, by giving out this, this nonsense, isn't going to sit well with the jury. And he did all these things. He tried to downplay the Access Hollywood tape on the Trump campaign. We were all there. The jury was there. It was a big deal. Everybody knew it was a big deal. And people are going to listen to Blanche and say, come on, between what we remember, between the testimony, this isn't believable. And then, he at one point, he tried to tell the jury, look, all campaigns are conspiracies to win. And then I don't think that's the argument you want to make. But yeah, it's a conspiracy, but everybody conspires.
Yeah.
It's
and he relied a lot on Costello's testimony, too, saying, telling the jury they can't believe Cohen because Costello said Cohen lied. Costello said Cohen told him that Trump didn't know about the payments. But considering the jury has had a week to marinate in Costello's horrible testimony and that was the ending point, it's probably a bad idea to remind the jury of Costello. I would just let that die. I would not bring up the name Costello if I were the defense. And, because last week during Cross, we said we would talk a little bit about Costello here. Aside from the side eye and the rude comments resulting in the judge clearing the courtroom to admonish him and dress him down for his contemptuous behavior, threatening to remove him from the stand and strike his entire testimony if he didn't stop it. Aside from that, the DA's office put up an email refuting Costello's assertion that he wanted to represent Cohen because he had Cohen's best interest in mind. This is from last week, right? And I think it was Hoffinger who was up for cross-examination for the DA. She's like, you had Cohen's best interest in mind? And then she put up a series of emails. One of them from Costello said to his partner, Jeff, it's time for you to call Michael Cohen. He's failed to respond to my emails and texts. We can get Cohen on the right page without giving the appearance that we're following instructions from Giuliani or the president. They put that in an email. In my opinion, there is a clear and correct strategy. Signed, Bob. And Jeff, this is the response I received from Michael after sending him a detailed text followed by a voicemail 1 hour later. He's playing us and the president. What should I say to this asshole? He's playing with the most powerful man on the planet. And she just put up this series of emails like completely debunking Costello's testimony that he only was there because he cared about Cohen and he had his best interests at heart, and he wanted to really represent him in this matter because his home and office and hotel room had just been raided. And it just completely destroyed anything that Bob Costello said, in addition to his absolutely just dickish behavior. And so leaving that, and then everybody goes home for a week and comes back and gets this, and he brings up Costello again. Let me remind you about the asshole we put on the stand last week. I just think it was the worst idea that you could possibly, who, unless it was Trump who said, you got to talk about Bob. What about Bob? I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, I think it was Trump. I think there are so many things in here that are because of Trump, and not the least of which, like, thanks to, Alina's going to take this, the corporate case to trial and land me in the hole for $500 million because, she's the pretty one that reminds me of, whoever he's seeking out in the deep, dark spots of his mind.
His daughter?
Well, sure. Yes, Ivanka. Reminds him of Ivanka slightly. Come sit on daddy's lap, a little freak show. I think that is a large explanation for a lot of these sort of strange decisions. And, like you were talking about before, this insistence that, Mr. Trump says they didn't ever have sex with Stormy Daniels, where, he's not willing to say it, but he's couching it in terms that it's like, all right, well, that is literally true. And you're not going to get yourself into trouble with perjuring yourself in front of the court. A ton of this is a narcissistic sociopath who has to have people who work for him engaging in idolatry and saying amazing things about him, even if it ultimately hurts his case, which it's doing here. Yeah.
Yeah. And so after the fantastic taste of Costello in your mouth, the jury comes back into the courtroom. They get their curative instructions, right, on Blanche telling him you can't send him to prison based on Cohen's testimony. And he tells them, Merchan tells them, a prison sentence isn't required if there's a guilty verdict in the case, and that they aren't to consider it. And during the defense summation, he said, Mershon says, "You heard Mr. Blanche ask you not to send the defendant to prison. That was not permitted, and you must not consider it. If the defendant is found guilty, sentencing will be my decision. In your deliberations, you may not speculate, discuss, or consider matters related to sentencing or punishment." So you have the judge, who the jury loves, saying that Blanche just did something that was not permitted. And here are your curative instructions. Another real bad look. And that's how he finishes his summation.
Right. And the final impression is, Dad, who we all like, smacking this kind of jerky guy who is bouncing all over the place, it's difficult to follow and is frankly a little boring. And, he's behaved like Dad's yelled at him before, and now Dad is yelling at him again. It just is not, I don't think, and again, this is backed up by some of the reporting coming out from reporters inside the court, doesn't seem like he's connecting with the jury. But again, he can fail to connect with all but one member. He can fail to connect with all the jurors. And there could be one juror out there who's like, you know what, damn it, I'm never going to vote to convict Trump. And that's all it's going to take. So, he didn't, in my opinion, do a very good job, but trying to get inside the head of the jury, you got to place our faith in the American public to people go in there and take their duty seriously and see what they come back with. But Blanche went on and on. The Exhibit 35, which was, talking about the fees paid to Cohen, and he was trying to tell the jury that, look, Cohen was being paid for legal fees and that these documents aren't fraudulent. He continued on saying, quote, "There were no false records. There is no evidence. There was no affair." And the jury, again, jurors aren't dumb, and particularly people who go to work and live in New York City and all the kind of, stuff that you need to know to survive the street smarts of an average New Yorker. This kind of stuff is not gonna persuade them, I don't think. And, I at the end of the day, between jumping around, between getting admonished by the judge multiple times, between bringing up Costello, between saying Trump didn't sleep with Stormy, about the stupid David Letterman top 10, the gloat. Come on, man. Come on. Just don't. It wasn't
very good. But again, like you said, and none of this, as we go through this testimony, none of this will tell us what the jury will do. We can only kind of sit here and comment and grade these lawyers and on their presentations as far as how we see them, or talk about how the reporters see them. But like you said, it's really up to this jury, and we can't really assume that there isn't one person on that jury that's just not already made up their mind and they're not going to convict Trump. So we'll see. Now, of course, after the lunch break, it was time for the DA, Josh Steinglass, and he presented his closing arguments. And we're going to take a quick break, but we'll talk about Steinglass's summation as soon as we get back. Stick around.
Hey, welcome back. We have more patrons to thank: Chuck Burry, Deborella, Sarah, Amy Boyle, I.P. Freely, Jeff Stafford. Thank all of you. Thank you for...
Always funny.
Yeah, I know. It's like a Homer. I envisioned Bart Simpson calling Moe's Bar and giving out these Amanda hug and kiss. Right. No, but thank all of you. I mean, this truly, you do make this possible. It is sorting through the news, sorting through what makes sense and what is important. We couldn't do this without your patronage. And so thank all of you so very, very much for your support to the program. It means the world. And so just like that, we're back from lunch. And apparently, despite Trump's constant whining about how cold it is, apparently it was like really warm and really humid and nasty. And I just, thank God, I didn't need to be there or a member of the jury. But, be that as it may, in that hot, humid environment, when everybody wants to nap and is tired, that's the setting where Josh Steinglass steps up for the prosecution. And he opened, quote, "We asked you in our opening to follow the facts, the bank records. We ask you to tune out the noise and ignore the sideshows. If you can, you'll see that the people have presented strong evidence. The defense seems to be questioning our integrity," unquote. And then with that, he shifted to another defense narrative, the one, namely, that Stormy Daniels was somehow seeking to extort Trump for money. Now, Daniel's first goal, Steinglass says, was to get her story on the record. Yeah, of course she'd rather tell the story and get paid, but that's a different thing than an extortion narrative. In the end, Steinglass continued, it didn't matter. You don't get to falsify business records just because you feel like you've been victimized, right? It doesn't, I feel like I'm victimized, so I get to go break the law. It doesn't work that way. In other words, extortion is not a defense to falsifying business records. And throughout this whole time, he's talking about Trump, not as President Trump for sure, not as Mr. Trump, but only referring to him as the defendant, which I thought was a pretty clever move.
Yeah, and that I love that. It doesn't matter. You still can't falsify business records, even if you feel like you're a victim of extortion. Reminds me of the OJ example we used, where you can't steal an election just because you feel like you lost or you feel like you won. Because, OJ, somebody stole sports paraphernalia from him, and he went and stole it back at gunpoint in a Vegas hotel. And it's like, that's not how you get your stuff back. That's not legal. Steinglass pivoted to Cohen at that point, saying, we told you who Cohen was. Cohen told you who he was. He says, quote, Michael Cohen is understandably angry. Pecker got a non-prosecution agreement. Dylan Howard's in Australia. Cohen was the defendant's consigliere. And then he got dropped like a hot potato and called a sleazebag, unquote. And Steinglass also addressed Cohen stealing from the Trump organization. Remember the Red Finch payment? And Cohen laid out $20,000, but allowed Weisselberg to write $50,000. That was wrong. That's stealing. We admit it. But after doing 3 years, he says he's paid the price. So it's not a defense. And then he addressed that October 24th phone call. That was what Blanche sort of felt like was his John Grisham, Perry Mason moment, where he called, and it was a 96-second call, but there were a couple texts right beforehand about a 14-year-old prank caller. And so this October 24th call to Trump and Schiller, Cohen said he called Schiller to talk to Trump, but later called that also to speak with Schiller about harassing phone calls. They say that's perjury. That's the defense's, quote, big lie. And then shows the photo of Trump with Schiller 5 minutes before the call took place. And then he says, we didn't choose Michael Cohen. We didn't pick him up at the witness store. The defendant chose him as his fixer. And he kind of said that pretty loud. And if Cohen were lying, he went on, he would have gone a lot further. He could have said that Trump told him to cook the books, but he didn't. He stuck to the facts. He stuck to the truth. Which also, Pete, reminds me of when Nicholas accused Stormy Daniels of making up the sex story. And she says, if I was going to make it up, I would have made it better. Cohen was drawn to Trump like a moth to the flame, Steinglass said. And Cohen, like Cohen, so was David Pecker. And like Cohen, Pecker also issued a denial about the Karen McDougal story. And he told you he did it to protect the campaign. So this is kind of the chance for Steinglass to get into the testimony and the documents that Blanche just ignored, including Pecker and Hope Hicks, who explicitly and repeatedly corroborated Cohen's testimony.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where you could really tell that Steinglass did an excellent job and with the jury was paying attention, because when it came to that phone call, apparently he pulled out his phone. He's talking to the jury, pulls out his phone, and this call was just like he said, just over a minute and a half, like minute 36 or something. Steinglass pulls out his phone, pulls out the timer, shows it to the jury, starts the timer, pretends to be Michael Cohen talking to Schiller. Yeah, hey, it's Michael. Yeah, I want to talk to you about, these kids that are harassing me. He pauses, pretends that Schiller's talking back to him. Yeah, no, we need to do something to make it stop. Pauses again, has this conversation, then pivots and says, look, by the way, let's talk about, I need you to pass a message to Trump, or can you pass me to Trump and convey this message? And then goes into what Cohen says. At the end of having that whole pretend conversation, he stops the clock on his phone, 49 seconds. So well under the amount of time. And the jury's watching, the jury is like, all right, I'm picking up what you're putting down here. And you run through it. And in a very measured, I'm not talking quickly, I'm pausing, I'm waiting, I'm leaving gaps. I have this conversation about both of these topics, and I stop in almost a little over half the time of the actual call. There's no juror sitting there saying, oh, God, of course you can talk. I mean, think about it. And it's common sense and then all of a sudden you're thinking about, all right, well, when I talk to my partner, when I talk to my kids, when I talk to my friend, whatever it is, yeah, it won't bounce around all over, in a short period of time. So I thought that was very, in terms of court presentation, jury appeal, I thought that was amazing. And then he said, look, remember, Cohen isn't the one on trial. Quote, this case is not about Michael Cohen. This case is about Donald Trump and whether he should be held accountable. And then he went on to acknowledge Cohen's role here, that, Cohen is here for context and color about the physical documents. Continuing, quote, those documents tell you everything you need to know. You don't need Cohen to connect these dots. But as the ultimate insider, he can do just that. You don't need Michael Cohen to prove this case, unquote. And then he pivoted from that to get to the very heart of all of it, which is the conspiracy. He said, quote, the case begins with 3 rich and powerful men high up in Trump Tower. And this is from Anna Bauer, writing, Steinglass reminds the jurors of the 3 components involved in the Trump Tower agreement. 1, they would run positive stories about Trump in publications owned by Pecker's company, American Media Inc., or AMI. 2, they would run negative stories about Trump's opponents. And then Pecker would use his network of publications and sources as the eyes and ears for the Trump campaign. And then finally, Pecker would alert Cohen to bad stories that were bouncing around about Trump so that Cohen could act to head off their publication. The scheme with AMI didn't have to have, quote, or didn't have a legitimate press function, in quotes, an important term that jurors will later receive an instruction on regarding campaign finance violations. Now, the entire purpose of the meeting at Trump Tower was to deny voters access to information about a presidential candidate. AMI stopped pursuing legitimate press activities once they became a quote-unquote covert arm of the defendant's campaign. You might think, quote, who cares if Mr. Trump slept with a porn star, unquote, and many people feel that way. But even if parts of the Trump Tower deal were a seedier version of politics as usual, the catch and kill element was not. Quote, and again, this is all what's being presented to the jury by the prosecution. Quote, once AMI purchased stories on a candidate's behalf and in coordination with the campaign, those purchases became unlawful campaign contributions. I suggest to you that the value of this corrupt bargain at the Trump Tower meeting cannot be overstated. It turned out to be one of the most valuable contributions ever made. This scheme, cooked up by these men, could very well be what got President Trump elected.
Ooh, that's a really good statement, right? Especially if you're reading the jury and you think that they don't like Donald Trump. But then Steinglass would go on to lay out all the facts of this case chronologically and logically. And at the first afternoon break, Steinglass said he was only about a third of the way through his summation. And that seemed like too long for me, but he kept the jury's attention. After lunch, the judge said they would break at 5 p.m. and, take the temperature of the jury. And then the jury said, we're good till 7. So then after more chronological coverage of the calls and texts, mentioning the defense failed to talk about any of the other credible witnesses, and going over the testimony of Pecker and Hope Hicks and others, of course, that bolstered Cohen's account, some folks inside the courtroom reported that Steinglass was much better at engaging the jury, was more organized, kept a good pace going. And of course, like I said, at 5, the judge spoke to the jury. He said the jury seems alert and that they want to keep going, and that they would want that the jury told him, we want to finish summation today. We want to stay here until it's over. So the judge said they'd reevaluate at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we'll talk about what happened between, in that time period.
Yeah. And so in the final stretch, Steinglass picked up with the reimbursement scheme that was made up by Weisselberg and approved by Trump. And he continued that Trump caused the false entries to be made. Now, that's an important concept because the DA needs to prove that Trump falsified or caused to be falsified business records. So again, it's kudos to the jury for wanting to stick through it. It is not a simple cut and dried, man got in the car with his gun, drove to the bank, put the note to the teller, got the money and left. It is a complex set of charges.
Yeah. And let's talk about the jury instructions for a second. Or we haven't seen them. We've seen kind of some of the decisions. on them. And we heard the hearing on jury instructions last week. But from what I gathered from that hearing, jurors must decide, like you said, whether Trump made or caused to be made false business records, as Steinglass brought up. But here's the thing. They don't have to agree on the unlawful means, those underlying crimes to conceal that the crimes that Trump tried to conceal or commit. Those underlying crimes are the things that make these falsification of business records felonies, right? This is what makes them felonies. And they can pick between federal election law, which we just talked about, Steinglass spoke of, the falsification of other records, right? Or tax crimes, which are grossed up. So so they don't have to unanimously agree on the underlying crime.
Yeah, and
it doesn't have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So that makes it kind of a bit easier, I think, on the jury.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it does, it will provide a huge amount of ability to sit there and say, okay, we don't need to worry about, whether or not we agree on these smaller things in areas which I can see a group of people getting dragged down into arguing through each one. And you can tell, like, Grandpa Rico was upset and took to Truth Social saying, these are patently unfair. And, he had, while the public hasn't seen the jury instructions, certainly the legal teams have, and presumably Trump has been briefed on it. And he was very unhappy about it. And to the point of these underlying crimes, Steinglass put up smoking gun exhibits and said, these two exhibits are the agreement for falsifying the business records. They are the smoking guns. They are the smoking gun. He goes on to say, quote, I'm almost speechless that they're trying to make the argument that the payments from 2017 are for services rendered. The handwritten notes in these documents blow that out of the water. These are the bank statements for the transfer to Davidson and Associates for the $130,000. And the Weissenberg notes are on the receipt for the wire to Stormy. And with that, Steinglass asked the jury, here's a question for you. Is there anything about Donald Trump that makes you think he'd pay twice what he owes someone? But it was worth it to hide the reimbursement.
That's an excellent question, I think, to ask the jury. And one of my favorite lines of the day, Steinglass says, the fact is, Cohen did pretty well here. He got a cool title, personal attorney to the president, and he used that title to get consulting clients. Remember Essential Consulting? He said he made more than anyone in government, and don't I know that? That's what Steinglass said, which got a big laugh from the reporters in the overflow room. And it was just hit after hit after that. Steinglass displayed the Office of Government Ethics form in which Trump said that Cohen incurred expenses in 2016 and sought reimbursement for those expenses. Trump subsequently reimbursed him in 2017, according to the disclosure form. Then he shows a 2018 Trump tweet where Trump says he repaid Cohen for the Daniels payment through reimbursement. He said that in a tweet. Quote, and yet the defense still insists that these payments were for legal services. To find the defendant not guilty, you'd have to disregard the defendant's repeated admissions that this was a reimbursement. And another favorite moment of mine is when Steinglass was talking about the Red Finch poll rigging bill. Remember where Cohen gave him $12,000 in cash with a signed boxing glove and a Walmart bag? That's Red Finch. And Steinglass said, in any event, none of this matters because Blanche said Cohen stole $60,000, but they're trying to have it both ways. They're denying $420,000 was a reimbursement at all. But if that's true, then there was no theft because Cohen was getting paid for legal services. So they can call him a thief or claim that this is not really a reimbursement, but not both.
Yeah. And I don't know how, again, if the jury is following this and they've been doing nothing but sitting and listening to this evidence, they're going to see that as the obvious apparent truth. And then, the icing on the cake, Steinglass said, hey, let's talk about Costello, his behavior during the closing, as well as saying that, quote, Cohen wasn't playing Costello. Costello was playing Cohen. And then when Costello testified here, he showed nothing but disdain for this court. And you can take that into account in assessing his credibility, which I think is a huge point. I think the jury was already there, and upon hearing that, we're allowed to do it.
Yeah.
All right, great, done. All right,
Yeah.
we're
Don't need to
going to
tell
do it
me
anyway,
twice.
but now you're telling us it's allowed? Fine. He was an asshole, right? It's not. This gives them leave to do what they were already doing and hope to do sort of overtly, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something else he brought up is that it completely strains credulity, knowing who Trump is and what a micromanager he is, that he didn't ask about a bunch of $35,000 checks to Michael Cohen. You know, given that McConney wasn't fired, or that he was fired for not negotiating down invoices, that Cohen offered people 20 cents on the dollar when the Trump University closed for the vendors, all the book excerpts and other evidence that he's a micromanager. I get why Steinglass said, you know, use your common sense here. And, you know, like we talked about, denying everything, there was no falsified records. There's no evidence. There was no affair with Stormy Daniels. That kind of outright denial, it just isn't reasonable. When you can't concede anything, I feel like that goes against your credibility, you know?
Yeah. And think back to that Trump quote in the height of COVID where he's like, I don't take responsibility at all. Remember that? That is Trump. I am perfect. It is total, complete exoneration. I have never done anything wrong. I have never shown any fault. I do not have any fault. I have never made a mistake in the slightest, smallest way ever. And again, it's absurd. Humans are human. But to sit there and have this coming out in court form for what has been the persona of this man that we've all had to live with now for going on whatever it is, 9+ years. It is him. It is this absurd buffoon who refuses to even take the responsibility that a 5-year-old would when caught with their hand in the cookie jar. It is complete. I've never done a thing wrong in my life. Not one. And that was, again, I think back along similar lines, I think it was the Trump Organization trial where the judge wrote, you know, what is remarkable here, and I forget the exact wording.
Oh, yeah.
The utter lack of, responsibility or willingness to take responsibility at all. It is this through line.
It's pathological, he called it.
A pathological inability to take responsibility for any fault whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. And it is now conveying through Trump to his attorneys in these nonsense arguments that they're having to put up.
Yeah. And one other thing that came up that I thought was interesting, because I know a lot of folks on Twitter are like, yeah, but how do we know that Donald caused these records to be falsified, that he had a part in it? And Steinglass reminded everybody that, and this is per Pecker's testimony, that Trump deputized Cohen in front of Pecker. And when I say deputized, I mean, he told Pecker that whatever Cohen says, do. It's good with me. And that makes it impossible for Cohen to have been acting on his own. He it was you do what he says, and right in front of Pecker, and Pecker testified to that. So I think this is going to be a pretty steep hill to climb for anybody on the jury who thinks that Trump should be acquitted. I personally don't think he'll get an acquittal. We don't know if the jury will be hung, but we'll see. We'll see how it ends up happening. I'm going to take a quick peek here now that we're rolling up on 8 p.m. And I'm wondering if we're getting toward the end.
I think we are. From the comments, it sounds like they're wrapping up and talking about a jury of his peers. And there was apparently Steinglass did try to say Donald Trump can't shoot someone on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and get away with it. Objection, which was sustained. But again, that's in the ears of the jurors. But it sure sounds like their 8 o'clock target. They may hit it. So you know what? I know we're going to pivot to other news after the break, but it sure sounds like, dear listeners, and even more dear patrons, that by the time you're listening to this case may very well be in the hands of the jury.
Here we go. Here it is. Soon it will be time to deliberate and to come back here and say guilty. Guilty on 34 counts. In the name of the people of the state of New York, I ask you to find the defendant guilty. And with that, it's wrapped up. So this morning, as you're listening to this, there'll be about an hour of jury instructions. That's what the reporters and experts estimate it to be. And of course, we'll let you know if that changes. But as far as for all intents and purposes, the jury has this case. And they are sitting on Wednesday, Thursday. They're sitting every day until they find a verdict. And I've heard tell, Pete, that juries don't like to come back on Mondays.
Oh,
so we may
no,
have
ma'am.
a verdict by the end of the week.
They did, and look, I think if this were some like mid-level white-collar criminal, I think that absolutely is true. I can envision a scenario where the jury is like, look, it's the first case ever of a president, former president. Let's just be double sure. But still, they don't want to. If they're all like, hey, look, why are we're all agree. Why are we debating anymore? We could see I think if there is a verdict before the weekend, that is a very good thing. If this goes into next week, we're all going to be going nuts. But I think it could be either a combination
At least it's not
of
a 4-day weekend.
either a holdout, or they're like, look, we got to be double extra certain because this is a former president. Let's be sure. And, God forbid we're all, sitting there climbing the walls Saturday, Sunday.
We'll see. We'll see how it ends up. Can't really say. But this seems like pretty fair jury so far from what at least the little we know from voir dire. So we'll talk about that on the next episode of Cleanup on Aisle 45. Pete, between this episode and next episode, I will probably have a verdict.
Yeah, and we may have a interesting bonus episode filled with swears and drinking, potentially. One way or the other. I think they'll be drinking. Either drinking like, why the hell do we have to go into the weekend and sit through this? Or we've got a decision that, so, yeah.
Why do you think I scheduled a live show in Chicago for Saturday, June 2nd with Renato Mariotti? There's still a few tickets available, everybody. You can get them at AllisonGill.com. Come drink and celebrate or drink and commiserate. Either way, we'll be there. All right, we have a lot more news to get to, but we have to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Kelly Lindros, Evan Williams, JR, Soft Snackies for Quiet Breakies, Dad Life, love that one, Henry Rowe. Thank you so much for supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. All right, it's time for an update on the embattled, broke, pitiful, probably smelly, hair dye dripping former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. He was arraigned.
And purveyor of fine coffees. Apparently, suddenly, Rudy Coffee. That's going to be unadulterated, fine caffeine right there.
I said, don't drink it. It's probably repurposed freeze-dried hair dye. Don't. So he was arraigned in Arizona this past week. So many things going on. Trump's on trial. Rudy's being arraigned. Like, this is where we were all dreaming we would be in the leading up to the 2020 election. So just revel in that for a second. But he was arraigned after he was served. We talked about this on the bonus episode this weekend for patrons. If you're a patron of this show, you get a whole extra episode on the weekends where we get kind of sweary and ranty. But we talked about how the process server was there saying happy birthday, served him his papers because he'd been posting on the internet. They'll never find me, like pictures of his 80th birthday party. 2 more hours and I'm home free. They got to drop the charges, which isn't true. If they don't serve me with my indictment. And because of all of these posts, they were able to find him, locate him, and serve him. So he was arraigned. Now, first of all, he was caught on a hot mic using the restroom.
What?
So that was fun.
What happened?
Yeah.
You did what?
Caught on a hot mic using the restroom.
And it was probably
fantastic.
like in a Rudy Giuliani 80-year-old man chuckle. It was not a I don't know. I still think the like farting next to Jenna is probably worse, but come on, Rudy.
We'll get to Jenna. We'll get to Jenna in the D block. And then he blathered on and on with his conspiracy theories till the judge was like, you need to stop or I'm going to mute you. They all pled not guilty, including Christina Bobb. Christina Bobb tried to reenact Trump's, never surrender photo.
Have you seen that photo? That photo, it makes me, she's got this weird look. She's trying to reenact. And my thought was she's going for like, come hither and like this. But you look at a photo and I don't know what it is about the shape of her head. It isn't come hither. It's like, we are from France. It's this pointy,
well, it's because
large
she's
stone. It's
tilting
like
her head down.
It's like a Roger Stone pointy tipped, like Zippy the Pinhead. I don't know, probably a few of our listeners, maybe you know that comic from the counterculture 80s. But yes, it's a weird, odd. I would not publicize that photo if that were me. But
she was tilting her head down. Well, I think she's trying to sell it as merch, sell her own Never Surrender shirts of her surrendering. But that's what happened in the arraignment. They all pled not guilty in the arraignment of one, Rudy Giuliani, and some of his co-defendants. There'll be more as time goes on here. And of course, that investigation is ongoing. Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator, and we still haven't heard back from the Supreme Court on Trump's immunity claims, which might be what Chris Mays is waiting for to see if that and how it would impact, if at all, her ability to charge Donald Trump with a crime.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to hear back from him, at least for maybe another several weeks. And, continuing with Rudy, some more news from CNN. Rudy Giuliani has agreed to never again publicly accuse two Georgia election workers of tampering with votes in the 2020 election, a false accusation that he has repeated frequently and that led to his bankruptcy. Now, with the agreement, Giuliani is forfeiting a years-long verbal and legal battle he's waged with the election workers, Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. It also gives the women significant power to hold him accountable if Giuliani again publicly suggests they stole votes to hurt former President Donald Trump, which is not true. A draft of the agreement filed in court Tuesday says Giuliani would be, quote, permanently enjoined from publishing, causing others to publish, and or assisting in others' publication of any statements that suggest that plaintiffs, whether mentioned directly, indirectly, or by implication, engaged in wrongdoing in connection with the 2020 presidential election. Attorneys for Freeman and Moss say the agreement would allow them to take Giuliani to court immediately if he repeats potentially defamatory statements. Quote, today ends his efforts to profit off of lies about these two heroes of American democracy, unquote, the workers' attorney Michael Gottlieb said in a statement.
Excellent. And this is very interesting because this got quite specific. You can't mention directly, indirectly, or even imply that they engaged in wrongdoing in connection with the 2020 presidential election. A little different than some of the bail conditions we've seen, where Harrison Floyd directly named people and then stopped naming them directly and sort of implied, and then the instruction didn't say implied, but this does. So it'll be interesting to see if Rudy can keep this. Now, all of his shows have been canceled and he has no money, so it might be easier than we think since he doesn't have all these radio shows to go on and complain about. But if Bannon brings him on his podcast, look out. We'll see what happens. And I'm talking about defamation. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals denied E. Jean Carroll's request to expedite Trump's appeal of the $5 million sexual abuse and defamation verdict against him. This is Second Circuit Judge Beth Robinson rejecting the argument that Trump might use his candidacy or his win of the presidency to delay the proceedings. The reason is that if Trump tried to delay for improper reasons, he would be denied, right? Quote, any future attempt to postpone the arguments once scheduled would require a showing of extraordinary circumstances. The defendant would face potential sanctions for taking or failing to take any action for the purpose of causing an unnecessary delay. So because that rule exists, I'm not going to expedite this appeal. If he tries to intentionally cause unnecessary delay, he'll be called out for it. So that's the latest update in the E. Jean case. I don't know your thoughts there, but I think that we're still waiting to hear whether or not, because I believe Robbie Kaplan filed on behalf of E. Jean that they want an injunction from him being able to continue to defame her, but also have said all possibilities are on the table because he continues to defame her to this day. Right.
And so separate and apart from, this the circuit decision saying that they're going to deny the speeding things up, there is completely on the table from what Robbie Kaplan is saying, because Trump will not shut the hell up about her, a chance for yet another lawsuit, which I think is pretty clear that he, in his statements has been doing the things that he was, found guilty of doing before. So, hey, Donnie, keep talking and, send out, Uday and Kusei today at the trial to speak to the media on your behalf. That'll go great.
Yeah. Man, that was just a zoo at the trial today, Pete. Just, I mean, to see, like, first of all, Don Jr., is there not like any family members who like love him?
An intervention to get him the Betty Ford Clinic, maybe? Yeah.
He's not well. But then you look down the street and here comes De Niro, Harry Dunn, Mike Fanone,
Yep.
like I have the Scorsese image in my head, or almost like the Reservoir Dogs of them like walking down the street. It was we needed some really good music behind it. And then they roll up and do their own press conference. And I thought that was pretty fantastic, because I know that now Gannell and Dunn and Danny Hodges are going to start campaigning for Biden in swing states ahead of the debates. So they pushed back. They came up today and said, look, we're tired of you coming out here and spilling all these lies out all over everybody. So we're here to have our own press conference. So thank you. And I thought it was pretty well done, because we've been like since the beginning, like, where's the Biden press conference out front of the courthouse? Why isn't there somebody to counter all of this ridiculousness of Matt Gaetz and Eric Trump and Don Jr. and Tiffany and Nancy Mace, all these people who are making their pilgrimage up there to show their support for dear leader. It's been kind of a bummer that nobody else was there to counter it, but today they were, so I was very glad.
Yep, agreed. And De Niro did a great job. There's some heckler, and he took him on directly and did a great job. And so it was like, again, if there's some sort of counter narrative every day, that might have been too much, but I think today was effective. And again, for the last day of trial, I mean, minus deliberations, well done.
Yeah, and according to Anna Bauer, they will start tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. He says to the jurors, have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. Gives them the typical instructions. Don't read about the case. Don't do research or facts on the law or research on the law. Abiding by those rules is important. It's more important now than ever, he says. And then he releases the jury. So we'll start again at 10 a.m. in the morning. That's today, as you're listening to this podcast, Eastern time. So looking forward to the episode next week, Pete. We have one more quick break and then a couple of other updates on some folks. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. Our last batch of new patrons to thank. Kinnett, Boreal Jan, Bill Wiesel, Distractor 2000, Anita Finkelstein, and finally Trump's face makeup guy. Not sure who does ears. Thank all of you for your support. Appreciate the funny names that make us laugh, and thank you so much for supporting the program. Now, a couple more updates for you. Let's go down to Fulton County. Now, Fulton County District Attorney's Office is appealing Judge McAfee's order that threw out 6 counts from the election interference case against Trump and others. In a hearing today in front of Judge McAfee, defense counsel for Harrison Floyd said he needs more information about the ballots cast in 2020 in order to determine whether there was a false statement. And the attorney says they cannot form a defense unless it's certain that Biden won the election. And he says Floyd shouldn't have to pay for the production either.
Huh.
Now, yeah, it'll take, and so the judge asked, like, okay, government, how long is it going to take? And they said, it's going to take a long time to produce 800,000 voter applications, redact information from them, print off the applications, and the county shouldn't have to bear that burden. And when McAfee said, okay, well, what are we talking about here, time and cost? The attorney said, look, it's going to be thousands of hours. And so, in his face, I was like, oh, come on, you've got to be kidding. But I don't know. I mean, there's a point too where there's a vigorous defense aspect to this that, maybe at play.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, don't give the state anything, like ask for everything you possibly can.
Yeah. And
they won't get this. I don't think that it's not reasonable. I think it's overbroad. Maybe they can have the fact that there were multiple hand counts and multiple investigations and no widespread voter fraud, determinative voter fraud was found. Maybe that'll be enough. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anthony Crease, who's a Georgia-based attorney and commentator, said, I don't think it's unreasonable for a defendant to demand the state show their work rather than take the state's word for things if their defense is that the state messed up the election. But Whether that tranche of materials is admissible evidence is a completely different question. The real problem isn't the demand of documents per se, but the possibility of admitting them with some junk expert in a trial. We're far from that point now. And then, in addition to that, there's a brief issue for Trevian Kutti during the hearing regarding her counsel because her new lawyer filed his appearance on the wrong docket. And so Judge McAfee said, hey, can we talk about your counsel status here a little bit? And she said, no, I've retained George Donalds, and this will be fixed.
I got it. Okay, so filed on the wrong docket. And I think she said something like, I just learned about this on Twitter myself, so we'll take care of it. Interesting. That's pretty great that Twitter was got the news first. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals, we're going to move up to DC right now. They have denied Trump advisor Peter Navarro's petition for an en banc review of a prior decision that rejected Navarro's appeal of his 2 convictions of contempt of Congress. So he went up asking emergency relief from John Roberts and then went and asked Kavanaugh again for emergency, or was it Gorsuch for emergency relief? They're like, get out of our faces. This is the other appeal of the actual convictions. And today, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals denied. Sorry, you have to stay in prison. And beyond that, we're not going to throw out your conviction. Even if you're done serving your sentence, we're not going to throw it out. That's en banc. So next step is Supreme Court. And, Pete, Judge Nichols, remember the one guy who says that obstruction of justice has to have a document associated with it? He was the one who let Steve Bannon out for 2 years while he appealed his contempt charges. He set a June 6th hearing on whether to remand Steve Bannon to prison. So I don't know why there's a hearing for this. I don't know why he can't just deny Steve Bannon's motions to stay out of prison pending his appeal. But he's having a hearing, and it's going to be on June 6th. Now, he could go straight to prison from this hearing. We don't know.
I doubt it. But you're right, he could. But I don't see, Judge Nichols being that severe.
Yeah, probably not. And if that wasn't enough good news, Pete, Jenna Ellis has agreed to a 3-year suspension of her Colorado law license for her felony guilty plea in Georgia for attempting to overturn the 2020 election results. So she can no longer practice law for the next 3 years in Colorado. That's a sanction that she has to face. And I guess a lot of attorneys, a lot of state bars automatically suspend your law license for a certain amount of time if you've been convicted or pled guilty to a felony, which she has. So the woman who told me to cry more on Twitter and then cried in front of everybody while she pled guilty has now had her law license suspended. So that's too bad.
Yeah, and she's been a little aggravating because she spent the last, I saw some back and forth, I forget who she was arguing with on Twitter, but essentially saying, I'm not a felon, that, this was it wasn't a NOLO plea, but there was something where essentially after she completes probation, this is expunged or removed from her record, and she was trying to really split hairs about, she hadn't really done anything wrong. It's like, Jenna, shut up. You're going to be disbarred. And you have been now for 3 years. You did, in fact, you are an admitted felon. You admitted to that. Now, whether or not it's ultimately removed from your record or not, I don't care. You stood up and admitted that you did these things. So stop trying to whitewash and, snow all of us about your horrible, unpatriotic, coup-enabling behavior in 2020. Own it and just stand up about it. Stop the weaseling. Stop being a Trump, right? Stop refusing any accountability whatsoever. Just say, I messed up, I was wrong, and I regret it, and stand by that. That is a greater measure of character than doing what you're doing now. But who knows? She obviously doesn't listen to me, so it's just my view of it.
Yeah. So looks like Bannon's going to go to prison. Pete Navarro can't get his conviction overturned. Rudy Giuliani is bankrupt and now completely gagged from speaking about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, owes them $150 million, was arraigned in Arizona for his indictment this week. Now we have Jenna Ellis with her suspension of her law license. This is great stuff. This is good. I think this is good stuff for justice. The rule of law might not have happened as quickly as we have liked it to happen. We've got a jury out now in a Trump trial, and we'll see what happens there. I don't want to get too excited about it because, like you said, hung jury. Who knows? Who knows what the jury's going to do? But this is a pretty good week for the rule of law. So thank you so much to our new patrons for supporting this show. It's been a long time cleaning up aisle 45, 175 weeks. That's almost 3.5 years we've been at this, and we're finally in the middle of it. I know it's a lot of news, but you guys and for listening, thank you. And for our patrons supporting it, you make it possible. We appreciate you. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here this week?
No, there's a lot going on, and it'll be very interesting, as you're listening to this on Wednesday. Now the hardest part, like waiting on jury deliberations, many of you may have been through it before, but if you haven't, it's horrible. It is terrible. Every note they send, hey, can we get clarification on this? What does it mean? Can we see this, piece of information? Can we get 2 more pads of paper? I mean, every single thing is just nerve-wracking. If you haven't been through it, get ready. If you have, you know what to expect. So just buckle in, get a bottle of your favorite beverage, and we'll make it through and see where we stand.
You'll have flashbacks to Manafort jury deliberations. But these are state crimes. These can't be pardoned. Ha 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 ha. All right, everybody, we'll see you. Patrons, we'll see you this weekend. Keep your eyes on your inbox, because we're going to let you know when we're going to have that Q&A Zoom call with Pete and I. So we'll keep you posted there, and we'll see you next Wednesday, when I'm pretty sure we'll have a verdict in this case. Until then, I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.